Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Tell us about yourself. What is your title? What do you do?
Okay, my name is Jennifer Huberty. I'm an associate professor at Arizona State University, and I'm a researcher. I am a behavioral interventionist, so I help people change their behaviors, whatever that may be. Typically, physical activity is the main behavior that I've worked with most of my career, but yeah, I help people change their behaviors.
Okay, great. So, we're going to talk about physical activity today. What is the state of physical activity?
I would say physical activity is a major public health problem. So, sedentary activity, which is sitting and really not much movement. That's what's a predominant in our society today. If you think about, we sit at our computers, we sit in our
Mm-hmm.
car, we sit at our desk, we sit. We're really good at that. We go through the drive-through a lot. We're really good at that. So we have a problem moving our bodies and being physically active.
What are some of the things that we can do to make ourselves more accountable for our health and well-being through physical activity?
Well, I think the key word there is accountable. I
Mm-hmm.
think when you talk about physical activity, people are really fast to give every excuse or reason why they can't be physically active, but you really have to take a look at yourself and be accountable and say, okay, what are these things, if you will, these excuses that I'm using as barriers, and how can I overcome them? And actually, one of the best ways to do some of this is kind of think about your self-worth and your concept of yourself.
Okay, so that's a big part of your research, self-worth. So how does all of that tie into physical activity and mental well-being?
Well, so years ago, I did a study where I put women who were completely sedentary into a 12-week intervention where they tried many different activities. And then when they were done with the intervention, I waited a year and I reached back out to them. And I asked them if they were being physically active or not. And about 30% were still being physically active, which is typical of an intervention for physical activity. But the key finding was that women who were still active said the reason they were was because of their self-worth and how they felt
Mm.
about themselves. So I that started my a lot of my research in the sense that I thought to myself, well, okay, we typically put someone through a physical activity or intervention. We give them an exercise or an exercise program, and then we say, go do this. But what are we doing to focus on self-worth? If this is the reason I'm maintaining this, what are we doing to continue to figure out what it's going to take? And so typically self-worth is in the literature is looked at in relation to physical health and
Mm.
the
Mhm.
physical self. So
Mhm.
if you think about that in terms of exercise and activity, why do most, let's take women for example, why do most women exercise? I think a majority would say for weight loss or maintaining weight, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
if I'm starting physical activity and my motivation is to do it because I want to lose weight, a physical self-worth, and I don't lose weight, what is my buy-in to continue doing that?
Mhm.
But self-worth actually encompasses emotional, social, and knowledge. So those concepts of self-worth become very important. So if I understand why I'm active and how to be active, and I understand how my environment can support or not support how I feel about myself in activity and my social relationships and those things, how do I improve those things so that I want to participate in the behavior, and then the physical will just take care of itself.
Mm. So let's talk about some of those factors related to self-worth and well-being. What about social relationships? What about environments? How can we use those to enhance our self-worth?
Yeah, so we have to think about, so for social support, let's say, if we think about, again, physical activity, as a woman, again, I'm using women being biased that I'm a middle-aged woman, but I'm going to think about what are my supports in this, and how is that helping me take care of myself? So, are my friends active women, or are they more likely to want to go sit and drink and eat heavy foods, let's
Mhm.
say?
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe it's best to have friends that are most interested in walking and having coffee or walking and having wine instead of sitting and drinking and lounging. And it's it's just an example, but thinking about our social support. The other thing, too, is what about the people that we live with? And
Mhm.
how do we talk to them about, I need to be physically active for myself, and how can this work? So if I make dinner every evening, no one's going to die if we eat dinner at 6:30 and not 6 o'clock.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
okay to take
Mhm.
care of yourself and say, I'm going to exercise from 6 to 6:30, and um, we will have dinner after.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
another example.
So there are tangible ways to go about doing this, right? What are
Mhm.
some more ways that people can get started with enhancing their physical activities?
Yeah, so some of the major strategies for physical activity is tracking. So
Okay.
tracking yourself and seeing what you're doing. But the important thing that's about this is that there's a goal setting piece to this. But the goal setting piece has to have nothing to do with anybody else but yourself.
Mm.
So we typically hear 10,000 steps to maintain health benefits. And the science suggests that, and that's fine, and that's great. But if I'm a person who is just starting out using a Fitbit, and I'm noticing that my steps are ranging from 2,500 to 3,500 a day, which is probably on the high end for most people that are not meeting recommendations. Reaching 10,000 is very difficult.
Right.
And it also
Right.
doesn't help in terms of confidence in our own ability to do something. So maybe just taking a look at what am I able to do right now and increasing that by 10%. So my
Mm.
3,500 becomes 3,850 the next day.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
3,850 becomes, I'm not going to do all the math, but 4,000 and change the next day. So again, thinking about that, and then not committing to every single day at first.
Mhm. Mhm.
Committing to 2 or 3, overcoming some barriers that come up along the way, and feeling confident and good about being able to do those things, so that later down the road, when we add to 5 and 6 days, oh, I got that. It's easy.
Mhm.
I can do it. I proved it to myself.
So you have to start out with an individualized approach.
I think individualized approaches are the best, yes, versus, group based, what everybody else is doing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And what if people are having a difficult time doing it on their own? What can they do? Is there professional help?
Yeah, so I mean, there's many ways, and again, it just depends on what resources are available to people. So,
Mhm.
obviously, there's gyms that can be joined, and I know there exists social type groups on social media like Facebook, and walking groups. But what I say is, again, if you're being accountable and you're taking care of yourself, you're asking for what you need. So you're going to find someone who's going to support you. You
Mhm.
might say to
Mhm.
a friend, I'm going to start doing this. Would you like to join me? Or could you support me? Or let's support each other in this. So again, it's taking the accountability instead of saying, oh, I don't have any resources. I don't have the money. I don't know anyone. Making that happen for you.
Mhm. So, accountability, social support, the environment that you're in, these are all factors that play into
Mhm.
your self worth and your physical activity.
hmm And I think environment is important too, because even in our home environments, a lot of us have home gyms, if you will,
Hmm.
but they become holders of laundry and holders of,
Hmm.
like Hoarders Anonymous, right?
Right.
And so it's like, and when we put them in dark places that are dreary and nobody wants to go to anyway,
Hmm.
I always tell women, in some of the work that I've done in women's health, I say, put that treadmill in the middle of your living room, looking out the window, and watching the neighbors or whatever you want to do, something that
Hmm.
motivates you, with a fan and a stereo or a TV. And when people come in your living room and they're like, oh my God, what is that thing in the middle, they're never going to say that, first of all, and second of all, they're going to wish that they were that committed to doing that. So thinking about those kinds of things is very important too.
So, make it accessible, make it inviting to yourself.
hmm hmm
Great ideas.
yeah,
Okay. Well, thank you so much,
sure.
Dr. Huberty, for being with us today. And I hope this was informative and beneficial.
Thank you for having me.